Hello, Sigby Trent here, and welcome to my video series, What Do I Think?, where I answer questions and talk about subjects suggested by my friends, and folks in my family often as well. Okay, so this question was given to me by a friend, and it is, what is the difference between Tokyo and Sapporo? Oh, pretty good question. I lived in both of these cities while I was in Japan. So I spent about 6 months in Tokyo, and I lived for about, I guess it would be about 16 months in Sapporo. So they're both big cities by general standards, but Tokyo is a much larger city. It's about 9.2 to 13.9 million people, depending on how you define it. The core city is about 9.2 million people, which is a lot. If you kind of extend out to its actual geographical borders, it's 13.9 million people. It's a whole bunch. It's the biggest city in the world, basically. It's on the east coast of Japan, kind of in central Japan. Sapporo is 1.95 million people, so nearly 2 million. It's in Hokkaido, which is an island in northern Japan, and it's on the coast, kind of a southwest coast of the island of Hokkaido. And it's separated from the main island of Japan. You actually have to take a boat or an underwater train in order to connect the two, or a lot of people fly as well. So that's Tokyo and Sapporo, kind of geography and population. All right, so the biggest difference between these two cities, I would say, is that Tokyo is a very old city. It was originally called Edo from 1603, and it was kind of the center of the Edo period, the cultural period of Japan, which saw a lot of artistic expansion and unification of the country in various ways. I'm not a historical expert on these things, but it was a very important location for a very long time, so it has a deep, rich Japanese cultural history. Sapporo, on the other hand, is more like a frontier town of the Old West in the sense that it was settled in the mid-19th century. It was first named Sapporo in 1868, and at that point it was kind of like a mining camp almost. As the Japanese Empire was expanding into the island of Hokkaido, really wasn't part of the core of Japan before that. It was populated by the Ainu people, who I guess would be kind of analogous to Native Americans or to Native Alaskans in culture, or the native people in the Siberian region. At any rate, the Japanese government kind of came in, take over, culturally assimilated most of them. And there's some kind of dark parts of that story. That's something that's been changing for the better a little bit as of late. But at any rate, it's a new city, and it was founded during the industrial era. So it doesn't have this kind of old-style Japanese architecture, old-style Japanese city planning. It's a thoroughly modern city, and it was designed for automobiles and trains and modern-style buildings. So if you look at historical Tokyo, you're going to see a lot of old wooden buildings and kind of beautiful lattice work and that kind of classic Japanese architecture that we expect. If you go to Old Sapporo, what you're going to see are red brick European-style factory buildings of the industrial era, because that was what was popular. You even see sort of colonial-style columns and a strong Western influence if you're going to go to historical Sapporo buildings. And there are quite a few. So another thing that's very different is, like I said, Sapporo was built for cars. So everywhere in the city, there are very nice straight roads. It's very easy to navigate. There are parking spaces and places where you can park a car. In Tokyo, this is a lot less common, and the streets are really tangled and complicated. It's very easy with Google Maps to get lost down some tiny little alley somewhere in your car. That doesn't happen so much in Sapporo because it's a modern-style city. It was built for cars, not for walking. Tokyo was built for walking. So there are climate differences as well. Sapporo is famous in Japan for not really having a rainy season. They don't get the typhoons and the heavy rains during the fall and spring like other parts of Japan do. And so in this sense, it's considered to have exceptionally nice weather. It does, however, have a very cold winter. The island of Hokkaido gets a lot of snow in the winter, especially interior Hokkaido gets very, very cold, very heavy snow. But Sapporo gets quite a lot of cold and quite a lot of snow. They famously have a snow festival. Although with global warming, it's getting a little less so. This year, they actually had trouble finding enough snow for the snow festival. Come 2021, I'm guessing they probably won't have the snow festival, or they will have a much reduced version of it because of COVID-19, which is too bad. It was really a great festival, but it was kind of when COVID-19 got kicked off, and in a way, it was the super spreader event in Hokkaido that got the disease started there, which is too bad. All right, let's see, cultural differences. Tokyo is an incredibly intense, cosmopolitan city. People come from all over the world. Business dominates everything. Everywhere you see men in suits. The subways are full of men in suits. The bars are full of men in suits. The restaurants are full of men in suits. The place just beats to the heart of industrial capitalism, right, and financial capitalism. Sapporo is a more relaxed town. I mean, it's part of Japan. It's modern. There's a lot of business. You will find a lot of people in Japanese business suits, but overall, it has a more relaxed view. You will see more people wearing casual clothes, walking around. You'll see more older people. You'll see just kind of a more diverse cross-section of the population of Japan. Tokyo is a place that young people go to make their careers. And so it feels a little bit younger. It feels a lot busier. Sapporo is where people live, so you're going to find families and children and things like that a lot more on the subways. And it's just a lot less intense and a lot less crowded and a lot less busy. And this is reflected, too, my personal view of Japan, in the way students behave at the English studio. In Tokyo, everyone there was sponsored by their company, and they're there to learn business English. They want to advance their careers. They take the business textbook at GABA. But in Sapporo, most of the people are on the kind of the personal textbook. It's for casual conversation. Some of them are interested in their careers, but a lot of them are interested in just learning for the sake of learning. They're actually university students who are studying English because they want to study abroad, or they're learning for casual conversation when they go traveling. And even a lot of the business people really want to learn English, not just for business, but so that when they go on business traveling, they can talk to local people and kind of enjoy conversation. So you see a really big cultural difference just in the way the English Learning Studio operates. Food culture is very different too. Now, Tokyo is a metropolitan city, and it's very famous for innovative food, so you can find all kinds of crazy culinary things in Tokyo. You can find great food from all around the world, and Tokyo is just famous for inventing crazy new foods, and there are certain neighborhoods where you can buy these foods, really innovative and wild ideas. The Japanese like to take food from other cultures and make them more Japanese. They're great at that, and Tokyo is a real hub of that kind of activity. Now, Sapporo and Hokkaido, on the other hand, are known for fresh produce. This is kind of partly a breadbasket of Japan when it comes to meat and when it comes to grains and things like that, and vegetables. So you get a lot of these things out of Hokkaido, and fresh melons and stuff like that. So it's really famous for this, and so when you go to Hokkaido, it's all about the fresh produce, and not so much in the innovation, but just taking the very best ingredients and preparing them in the freshest and nicest ways. So it's a very foodie city. People love food in Sapporo. They love food everywhere in Japan, Tokyo too. But I think Sapporo really, in some ways, is kind of a pinnacle of Japanese culinary tradition and passion. So it's a really great food city. The cost of living is actually not as different as you might expect. Tokyo does have much higher rents. It has the highest rents in Japan. Actually, if you're used to American West Coast cities, they won't seem that bad. They're kind of like mid-tier Seattle, definitely lower than something like San Francisco. However, for Japan, they're pretty high. Sapporo has incredibly low rents. Our apartment there was like $450 a month. Pretty amazingly affordable. Food and other things are actually pretty consistent between the two cities. Taxes and utilities and things like that don't vary all that much. Japanese consumers, I learned, are very fickle about prices, and so they tend to keep prices pretty uniform and pretty low all across Japan. So finally, just my opinion about these two cities. Tokyo is an incredibly fantastic place to visit. There are always incredible cultural events going on. There's so much to see. Every neighborhood has its own character and its own flavor and its own specialties. It is an amazing place to visit. Spend 6 months there if you can. You will see so many amazing places and amazing things. It's incredible. But to live there, it's kind of stressful. It's hectic. It's a little expensive. It feels intense. It's hard to have casual conversations. Everybody's got kind of a bubble up because you got 9.5 million people in this relatively small area. So everyone has to defend themselves against just getting worn out from social friction, let's call it. So it can feel a little private. It can feel a little shut in. It can feel a little cold in that respect. Sapporo, on the other hand, is very warm, very open, very friendly, but it's still a cosmopolitan city to some degree. Has a wonderful food culture. It's much more affordable to live. So Sapporo is a great place to kind of put down roots. And a lot of the clients I met were born and raised in Sapporo and never really want to leave because it is just a really nice place. You get modern Japanese culture, but without so much kind of hectic craziness that you see in Tokyo. But if you're just going to visit Japan, well, go to Tokyo first. It's an amazing place. There's so much to see. And frankly, during COVID-19, Sapporo could get a little boring. All right. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Thanks very much. If you have your own suggestions for topics that you'd like to see, please leave them below, and I'll be happy to address it. All right. Thanks very much. Good night.